Yeah, we're right up on the hour. Wanted to welcome you if you're just joining us here at the Tableau Fringe Fest. You have, well, you haven't missed it all. We're actually doing really well. But we've had some great panels. We had the Women Plus Data panel, the governance panel, some amazing presenters, but we're about midway right now through, and it's a pleasure to be able to present our next speaker. Our next speaker is actually, it's funny because I've known him for very long. In my head, he's always just been the data Jedi ninja. And for the longest time, I've always referred to him as the data Jedi ninja in my head. But this is CarlAllchin. And Carl is he's the other head coach at the data school in the UK. He's a social media ambassador, and he's used Tableau really heavily since version 7. So, Carl, I don't know if you're on, if you can hear us and get everything set up.
I am indeed, Caesar. Can you hear me?
Excellent. I can hear you just fine. Very happy to have you on. And one thing I noticed here, some of the information we've got, is you enjoy visualizing random subjects. I knew about the NBA, and one of my favorites, though, is the cycling data sets, because I'm a huge cycling fan.
Yeah, it's been pretty good fun measuring my distance this year. A friend heard that I was going to try and go for 2,400 kilometers this year, and he was like, "Well, why don't you just go for 3,000?" I told him not to be an idiot, and so 3,300 purely because they put it on a dashboard that updates every day from a Google sheet. So yeah, actually measuring stuff does get stuff done. There is a reason why we do this thing, right?
Absolutely. Well, I am going to hand it over now to Carl with Recruit Your Dream Team, what we learned at the Information Labs Data School. There's really a topic I love, and I actually keep tabs on LinkedIn and a lot of just jobs data. So it's always interesting to me to see how people are hiring and kind of what their job recs look like. So I will hand it over. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Caesar. So hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. And first of all, I just want to give a huge shout out to Playfair Data and Ryan Sleeper. I've known him quite a long time, but the fact that his company is now able to support things like the Tableau Fringe Festival and all the work that Emily and the gang have done to put this together. This is my third Fringe Festival that I've spoken at, but I still keep going back and using the resources from the previous ones. So thank you everybody who's involved in supporting this thing to keep it running. Just as a quick reminder as well for everybody else out there that if you can use the Q&A, that would be awesome. And apologies for the background noise. So I'm about to talk about recruiting this awesome team that we have done at the data school. It's currently 6 p.m. on a Friday night in London, so that means the beers are flowing, table tennis is happening, and my internet is down at my house, so I have to do the presentation from here. So apologies for the little bit of background noise and the excited voices in the background. Obviously, they're excited to hear me talk, but we won't dwell on that too long. So as Caesar was saying, recruitment is really hard within this data space, especially when we think of Tableau as a whole for its actual recruitment roles of what you're really asking for. You're asking for a fantastic analyst, you're asking for great design skills, and you're also asking for a lot of data skills to go with that. That's what we mean by hiring for Tableau. So I've always found this really tough. I've been a BI manager for years, as we'll get to a little bit later. But ultimately, the role that we have within the data school now, where we take an individual cohort of 8 people in every 2 months to go through 4 months of training, then 2 years worth of placements at our clients, has meant that we've had to ramp up recruiting a lot. And we really took kind of a deeper view of what recruitment is. So let's first of all look back on, why we're talking about recruiting. Then I'll talk a little bit more about the data school, and then just share with you 4 real simple tips as to kind of how we've got some things right and what we've learned along the way from this. So number 1, I don't think this will be news to anybody, but recruiting is hard, right? I know that's not news. How many times do you have to send out that same job description, advertise on the same websites, find those recruiters to help you, find those internal recruiters to help you if you work in the big corporates, as I've done for far too many years? And then also find that interview crew who really understands what your job is. There were just some of the normal challenges that as soon as I got that role signed off in my company, it would be some of the headaches that then kind of started to jump into the forefront of my mind, because HR, blessing and a curse, certainly within the large corporates, they have their standard way of doing things that drives people to your job advert. So you get people to actually come and look to be hired by you, which is great. But at the same time, it almost feels like that cookie cutter approach, that we're all trying to do the same things at the same time. And it just doesn't really work. How much is your own culture and personality really reflected in that job advertisement that you can actually really get signed off? And let's face it, this process actually really sucks. It sucks for you as a recruiter, and it also really sucks as the candidate. I'm sure enough of you have gone and applied for jobs where, as just a normal business person, and looking to go and find that job, which you either don't know fully exists or you roughly know what it means, it feels a bit weird. It feels almost mechanical and kind of assembly line-like process that you go through. Recruiters will try and get you to rewrite your CV. If you get lucky, you get that interview. And if you're a recruiter, you're lucky that you find the right candidates. But it's kind of that luck word that seems really dismal and depressing at this point, because how many people aren't lucky? How many people don't get those roles that they absolutely deserve? And how many recruiters don't get to find those right candidates they're really looking for? And also, everyone's kind of doing the same thing, but expecting those personalized results. Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results. So why are we standing by this model? This is kind of some of the challenges that I want to discuss about today. Well, who am I? First of all, as Susan mentioned, I'm the other head coach of the data school. My official title is the assistant head coach of the data school. But nobody knows what that means. So I just describe myself as the other Andy Kriebel. I'm also full of cold today, and I've been off for a couple of days, so apologies if I sound terrible during this as well. I've been a Tableau ambassador since the ambassador program was brought in a few years ago. I downloaded 5.2 as my original Tableau version, but really that was as a BI manager, a large insurer in the UK, but I really couldn't kind of break the back on it. I had a great team, but they were very much focused on taking a data set in Excel, working with that, putting it onto PowerPoint. They weren't necessarily this new breed of Tableau users, BI gurus that we kind of talk to every single day within the wider community. So, that was an initial challenge of me as a recruiter, trying to find the right people to come and work with me and try new tools. It was only really when I moved to Barclays and, when I first really heavily got involved in the Tableau community with version 7, that being in 2012, that really stuff kind of got motoring. And my first job was actually a really interesting recruitment process at Barclays. It was only by going and talking to Peter Jilks, who is former Zen master and now still Tableau user at Spotify, that I started to actually get this ball rolling. I went to speak to him about how he'd managed to get Tableau into his company, into Barclays, where I'd failed to do that at Aviva. We had a really kind of deep conversation around the stuff that we're interested in, talked about how we're trying to visualize the data. It kind of already felt like a natural fit. Whether we're looking at customer experience or the MBA, it's kind of the way that the world worked, was we realized we were talking the same language, which was super cool. The way I was recruited for the information lab that then went on to form the data school was also unique. The guides had seen me speak at the conference, they'd seen my Tableau public profile build over the years. But ultimately, that way of traditionally recruiting for the information lab, of going and spotting people that way, wasn't really scalable. Even though Tableau's grown massively within the UK, there still wouldn't be enough people around for us to go and absolutely find who we want when we needed to find them. So recruitment was this kind of continual challenge. Being recruited in a unique way was great for me, and it absolutely worked. But how many of those people were out there really interested in the same stuff, who hadn't started at the same time, didn't get those speaking opportunities, weren't getting that same opportunity to go from there? Also, from the information lab's perspective, as we grew, we can't keep taking people from our clients. That doesn't really work longer term. So, it's a great way to annoy your favorite clients after all. So also, whenever I talk about me, I always find myself showing my Tableau public profile or images from that. So whether that's my cycling log over on the top right over here, or some of my other weirder data sets I've played with from Makeover Monday or the MBA over time, I think it starts to describe me as the tool that I'm actually using. So again, if we just ask for a CV, would that actually really make sense? And also, I'm talking about recruitment because I think we have done a good job at the data school. Hopefully, you've seen the quality of blog posts that come out from the guys over the years. And also, just when you look at their faces, you see the diversity of people we've got. We know that the data world is still predominantly white and male. None of us enjoy that, let's face it. We really want to go and see that diversity, because with that diversity comes new ideas and approaches. And ultimately, that's what we love within the community, so I want to see more of that. So why is our recruitment being a little bit different? I'll get to that shortly. But ultimately, the number of people that we've brought through the door, I think this actual image is only up to about data school cohort 8. So the fact that we've had even more from there, or 9 or 10 actually, now seeing a few more faces, bringing in 8 extra people every couple of months and going and finding those new people has been quite a fun task for us to do. But ultimately, we like to recruit differently. Because actually, we're not going to beat the big boys at their own game. If we tried to recruit like a corporate, like one of the big 4 consultancies, etc., we wouldn't really win. They have brand kudos. They are known throughout the world. You guys might know of the Information Lab. You might know of the Data School because you're involved in the Tableau world and you're listening to the Tableau Fringe Festival. But actually, when we go out to recruitment sessions at the universities or kind of job fairs, etc., most people haven't heard of us. So how do we stand out? How do we do different things where we don't have that brand, maybe that bigger salary or that obvious career path where we have 17 layers of management? We just don't do that at the Information Lab, and we never have. So actually trying to find that untapped marketplace is actually an obvious challenge for us. But if we can go and find that unserved market, that becomes really so much easier. So actually part of the challenge, I think, with recruiting is looking at yourself, looking at how your company recruits. And actually, are you trying to do something different? And if you are trying to do something differently, if you do that well, then you absolutely will find talent. So to keep it nice and short and sweet, I've got 4 key tips for landing a great team. When I look back on the data school and what we've done, kind of these are the things that really jump out for me. Thinking differently about reworking this relatively redundant process, but the process that we all still have to live with in most organizations. So how do we get the right brains into the mix? Well, number 1 is about making your process, your recruitment process, mirror your culture. You know, you want to go and attract people that will just work and fit your organization. How do you do that if you're pretending to be something different than what you actually are? Like if we feel that the recruitment process is this cookie cutter approach, then that's never going to go and get that true fit for who you and your organization is. Information Lab started as a small company by Tom Brown back in 2010. Since then, it's grown pretty organically. As slowly over time, Tom found other like-minded people that he brought in. First of all, Craig, and then, you know, very quickly on Robin Kennedy and some of the others. They've just grown out the team until I joined as number 14. That was 4 years ago, and we're now a company of 150 people. We couldn't have made that growth if we were still kind of going and pinching people from our clients, which is why the data school actually originally arose. We wanted to be able to go and find those people who were like us, because the company had been successful. We'd grown organically. We didn't need a huge amount of input in terms of capital. So we knew that we were kind of recruiting the right people who were naturally self-starters, who were willing to learn and go and teach themselves. But how do you identify people like that? Well, you make your recruitment process actually mirror that more generally. So we get people to try and do what we did early on, where we were sitting at home by ourselves in 2011 and 2012, going and building those dashboards, going and learning Tableau from the videos online. You know, still how many people learn today. But actually, that's what we're challenging the people who want to come and work with us at the data school to do. Go and actually go through that process we did. Because if you're willing to do that, and if you're able to do that, there's a really likely fit that you are to mirror our culture. Also, we're looking for people with that curiosity, who's willing to go and play with a tool that they've never touched before in the hope that they can get a job with us. Well, it's a natural kind of piece that if you're willing to do that self-learning, you have the self-discipline to do it, then you're likely to go and mirror what we feel has made us successful, but also the likelihood of being a great consultant going forwards. The second piece is very different, because what we'd done was we'd always recruited from the population of people who are already doing this job. As I mentioned, that's still a very white male place. We knew that that wasn't going to be successful over the long term, and also it wasn't about the diversity that we were looking to form and actually really value. So we sat back and really tested every bias we could possible, some of it intentionally, some of it unintentionally. we intentionally tried to look for where we could go a little bit differently. So straight away, we didn't look at CVs. We wanted to actually test people on seeing what they could pick up in terms of their Tableau skills and work with us to iterate. How did they take feedback through that process? Could they actually go and build and develop those skills? Well, instantly, if we're going to put you through a 4-month training program that's pretty intense, we need you to be able to do that. And also, by not looking at CVs, we didn't cut out people who hadn't been in the industry previously. We get applications from right across the spectrum, people who are unemployed, librarians, bartenders, all the way through to people with PhDs in chemistry, biology, or even medical doctors, dentists, and nurses. That's actually what I've really valued about the data school, that we can teach anybody, but also that we've got loads of people who are willing just to kind of throw their hat into the ring because they feel like they have a fair chance at this thing. And also, when you're testing for the biases, it's not just about the people who get in, it's also about the people who don't get in through the process. Obviously, we're a data-driven company and we look at this heavily. But we also go and look at the people who didn't get in. So we go and talk to those who come to the meet and greets after they didn't get accepted first time rounds. We go and talk to people at the recruitment fairs and we ask them why they might not apply for our job when they're talking to us. And if somebody walks past the stand, we try and go and talk to them and say, what is it that didn't interest you? Is it about the job? Is it about not knowing us as a brand? What actually is it? But if you can really find out about the biases that you're potentially putting in place, then you can start attacking those. Ultimately, have we got everything perfect? No, of course we haven't. We're not arrogant enough to think that. But at the same time, by testing ourselves against those biases, then we can at least start to attack them and try and reduce those. Thirdly, test the job they're actually going to do. I still don't know why this doesn't happen in more roles. And I love Tableau for letting us be able to do this through Tableau Public. We can share our work. We can talk about the examples we do. That's super, super powerful. When we go and actually do interviews at clients, because we're often asked to help recruit for clients. I previously, in the space of 6 months with a client, did 100 interviews, and we only actually chose 5 people from that because we were still having to use those kind of common corporate techniques. So if you send in a CV, you tell us how good you are at the job. Well, no, let's not talk about that. Let's actually see how good you are at doing the job. That makes it more impressive. It also gets rid of some of those biases around people with experience that we've seen previously. But also it lets us really see whether the candidate's going to enjoy doing the job. Can they take the feedback? Can they learn from it? Can they develop from it? Or are they actually going to not be able to be coachable? That's a massive difference for us. We first of all test people on a data set that they're really enthused by, because actually we want to see whether it's a passion about their hobby or whether it's the passion for data that really helps. Because when we give them a data set for the second interview, we really see whether that person still puts in that same level of effort with that new data set. Ultimately, as a consultant, we're not always working our favorite industries the whole time. So again, testing that job to see how they're actually going to be able to do that and whether they enjoy it, most importantly. And that leads me nicely to my last point. The candidates are testing you too. I feel this always gets lost within this current process that is around and traditionally happens. Are you really showing you can be a great employer? Are you there for their questions whenever they need to ask them? Are you also giving that candidate a real, true flavour of your organisation and culture? Are you letting them spend time with your existing employees? Because at the end of the day, if you really hide the truth from day one, that first day when they're actually ending up in your office is not going to be a good one. And also all the way throughout the rest of their time with you in the organisation, are they having to change how they are to fit your culture? That doesn't feel massively right. That's probably going to lead to a shorter tenure and some real retention challenges to then go back through this tough process again. So actually being open about the challenges, about the strengths of your job, what people will probably find hard as they go through the process. So everyone who goes into this same deal with their eyes wide open can be a massively strong point. So really just reevaluating these 4 points. Have you made that recruitment process mirror your culture? Are you testing for the bias to go and find those untapped markets? And you're also testing for the job that they're going to do, because ultimately that's going to lead to success. Because the candidates are already testing you. So are you actually being fair and showing them a true reflection on where you're going and actually making them want to join you even more because you're being super honest with what you've done? So at that point, I'm going to say that's it and throw it over to questions if we've got any.
Carl, perfect timing. I haven't seen any questions come through Q&A. I think everybody's been riveted by the conversation. A lot of good information here.
Oh, good.
Keep an eye on the chat.
You know what? We have a question from Kathy Bridges. Can you talk a little bit more about points 1 and 2, please?
Yeah, so this challenge of making your recruitment process mirror your culture, like ultimately that is a challenge. And I think you've got to be pretty self-reflective to really understand what are those key elements of your culture without getting people in to do huge number of days in your office or work with your team. That's really hard to do. That was really easy for us in the early days of the information lab because we hired people from our clients. So they were used to working with us. But we wanted to kind of try to open that up as much as possible. So really, we tried to make that actual recruitment process, going through that process of learning a tool, specializing, developing, using blog articles, using the community to go and learn more about this thing that we were ultimately going to ask our users and to be employees on, was a super cool challenge that Andy and Tom and the guys put into place originally. And it's made me kind of really happy that we can keep digging into that. The bias testing is also hard. You've got to be super critical. We recently came upon a website where we could test the masculinity or any biases that we have within our job advert. And we actually still found today that it's pretty masculine biased. So we're currently looking to change that at the moment. But I think it's that challenge of if you can work out where your competitors, who ultimately you're probably going to try and fight for those same staff members from, then if you can really go and find those biases and ultimately get rid of them, then you're going to end up with those better people rather than having to go and fight nose for nose with that. Oh, so follow-up question from Kathy. If we're not using CVs, what are we looking at? We are looking at their Tableau public submission. So we asked for just one submission from somebody. And we don't really kind of go too much more widely than that because we want to be fair. We want to be conscious around people's time so we don't eat into their lives too much, just trying to do multiple applications or trying to create multiple perfect pieces of work. We just want to see that one application, which we think is a fair reflection of the amount of time that people normally put into working on CVs, etc. So hopefully that helps, Kathy. Last question I've just seen come through from Alan. Thank you for listening in, Alan. Do you survey your folks regularly for satisfaction and feedback? We do, and it's something we've started to do more and more regularly, especially we used to take in one cohort every 4 months. We now take in a cohort every 2 months, but they still get the full 4 months of training. So that's why Andy and I are training alongside each other. What that means is that we're not just one person seeing them throughout that whole training period. So we've been a lot more cautious and careful on, are we still getting a great quality training? Are the team still really enjoying it? And going further from there, are they still getting that support out in their placements, etc.? So yeah, we're trying to collect a lot more data on that, strangely. And yes, we do visualize that in Tableau. So yeah, it's been good fun. And that is still a challenge that we definitely need to do a bit more on, but are enjoying a lot.
Carl, thank you so much. I think there's a couple more questions in chat that I'll let you answer in chat, but we are right up at time, and we've got to keep moving on. I have questions I want to ask you, but I'll do it offline. So, Carl, thank you so much for coming. It's been fantastic.
Cool, thank you. Please feel free to tweet me the questions as well, guys. I will answer some in the chat. But yeah, always happy to talk about this if people want private calls as well.